Hey guys.
Hey, hey, hey.
All right. So, this is our first time. Okay. So
First
let's
time live.
let's just, raise a glass to that.
I mean, cheers.
Cheers. Okay. And so we want to ask for forgiveness in advance.
Yeah,
If
just
everything
bear
doesn't
with us.
go-
We're gonna try to get this thing going, but definitely tell your friends to join in. We have such an amazing story tonight. I mean, we put a lot of blood, sweat, and tears into making sure this final episode of season 7 is
the book.
Yeah, it's one for the books. This story is gonna be murder, music.
And murder and music.
I mean, those two elements right there.
Right. Are perfect. Right. They're perfect. So I'll let you take it away, MD. Let's get into our true crime case for today.
All right. So grab your wine because it's the evening and get into this true crime story.
Yes.
Let's go.
All right. So y'all, we are talking about, if you can't see, Dee Jackson, and we're gonna just do somewhat of like a presentation for you guys, and we hope that you'll fit.
Yeah, so you don't have to just watch us the whole time we're talking.
Right,
we will. You'll see us, but we want you to also have some interactive pictures. So,
right,
take it away, Steph.
So we're gonna travel back in time to April 1st, 1955, when Dolores Didi Velma Artis was born. Not much is known about her early family, except that her mother hailed from Mexico and her father came from the Dominican Republic. And I believe that she was Afro-Latino based on kind of like how she looked. There she is.
I mean, she's beautiful.
But she may have just simply been Latino. So I want to put both of those things out there. Dee Dee shared a special bond with her mother, who was a significant positive influence in her life. Growing up, she was described by her friends and family as confident and cheerful, a bright presence in the Crenshaw district of California, where she spent her teenage years. It was during these formative years at Fairfax High School that she crossed paths with someone who would change her life forever. Dun, 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 dun.
Who was it?
Tito Jackson.
Tito Jackson. And that's how our music
comes into that's play. How we enter in this whole music debacle. Speaking of Tito, let's dive into his story. Although I'm sure many of you know about him, but in case you don't, he was born Torino Adero Jackson on October 15, 1953 in Gary, Indiana. Tito was the third child in a family that would come to be recognized as one of the greatest musical dynasties in history. What do you think about that? Do you think that's accurate?
Oh,
the greatest
one of the greatest? Yeah, one of. They didn't say the greatest. I mean, I'm all about words. Okay. Words matter.
Well, they said,
and one of, I absolutely think so. I mean, I think you can't talk about Michael Jackson, who is arguably the best pop star to exist, without talking about the Jackson 5. So
yeah, I agree. And just wanted to put that out there just in case somebody wanted to give us a run for our money on that comment.
Yeah.
But growing up in a modest household, he picked up the guitar at a young age, encouraged by his father, Joseph Jackson, who started Tito playing one of his guitars. This early passion paved the way for formation of the Jackson 5, a group that skyrocketed to fame with chart-topping hits like I Want You Back and ABC in the late 60s and early 70s. Mm-hmm. Now, take a moment to imagine the whirlwind fame the Jacksons encountered, especially at such a young age. The success brought its own set of challenges, creating tension within the family, even as they dominated the music chart. Tito and Dee Dee's paths intertwined officially in 1972 after several years of dating through high school. And what drew Dee Dee to Tito was not the glitz of the Jacksons. And I think, it probably drew her a little bit, probably, but it wasn't entirely what drove her.
I agree. And I think it's important to note that, like, she met, in the up and coming, like they weren't like they were we know them to be today. Yeah, they were still up and coming. So yeah, for sure, she probably was attracted to, oh wow, like look at this guy, he can sing and he can play, and I'm sure some of that was the appeal, but like the lavish lifestyle, not knowing, and there's no way that she could have predicted the level of fame that the Jackson 5, reached.
Right, exactly. They felt deeply in love and their connection flourished quickly, leading to their engagement. However, marrying young can bring complications, especially when you're part of a famous family. While Tito was stepping into family life and love, the Jacksons were still novices navigating the early stages of their career. This union inevitably raised eyebrows, not just from fans who were skeptical of their commitment, but also from family members who were genuinely concerned about the collective success of the Jacksons. With Tito's responsibilities as a husband interfere with the family's budding musical journey, the question lingered in the air as the Jacksons tried to balance their personal lives with the intricate demands of the music industry. Despite what fans and family might have thought, Tito Jackson made the decision to marry Dee Dee.
Like what we say in this culture today, he stood toes down on his decision.
He did.
And he said, I'm marrying this girl. Like this is the one.
He loved him some Dee Dee. So, Ivy, I'm going to ask you, what do you believe people are naturally skeptical about people having either or, like having their career or having family? Why can't it be both?
Well, I think it can be both, right? But I think that, it's hard for it to be both when you are trying to make both of them successful.
Absolutely.
Like when you want both of them to be thriving, I want to have a family and I want it to be the bomb family. I want us to be at the top. I want us to be picture perfect and all of that. But I also want to have this amazing, successful career where I'm climbing the ladder and I'm doing all the things. And I think it's possible that you can have both,
right,
but it's not easy. And then I also think for women, or let me not say for women, I think that one is going to suffer. I think that both of them can be both amazing, if that makes sense. Like either I'm going to be like on my game, killing it at work.
Okay.
Or I'm speaking from a woman, obviously, because I am a woman, right. Or I am going to be killing it at home as the mom, right? Like I can do both, probably mediocre or like, average, like I'm doing good on both, right. But to kill it in both, I think is difficult. And I think when you get into it and as you grow and as you, really mature, you learn how hard it is to balance both. And I remember hearing this saying from one of the judges that when I was in law school and we were, being mentored by different judges. And one of the judges on the panel said, it's not so much that I balance well,
right?
It's that I know what balls it's okay to drop from time to time. And it's not so much balancing all the balls. Right. It's like, it's okay that this ball drops in this moment because right now this ball is the most important and I need to make sure this ball doesn't fall. And so I just think you learn to navigate that, not balance it. But what do you think? Like, why do you think that that's such a stigma?
I think that, it's different from men and women. As you said, you're speaking from the perspective of a woman. I think it's more tolerable and acceptable for a woman to want both, right? Because like we fought for both, right? Like we quite literally fought for both. And I think that people expect women to get pregnant. So it's like, well, I guess, reluctantly so. But I also think it's different for men because if you're a famous person like a Tito or like Travis from Colorado who just won the Heisman Trophy, a lot.
Because that's a whole story in itself.
And he wants to get married.
Right.
He wants to get married. He wants to start a family, and he's moving that train along at a trajectory that most people feel like he's making a mistake.
Yeah.
And it's not solely just that, but I just think that like you said, it's a balancing act, but I think you can do it. Like you can. Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah, for sure. So, Tito decided to get married to Dolores and start a family, and this made headlines. Like people were pissed.
But like, look at them though, right?
So cute.
The cutest. Like Tito really was. We talk about how fine Michael was, but like his
Tito was attractive too.
Tito, yeah,
for sure. And if you guys see, I'm like trying to highlight it with the. But the third picture, which was their wedding day, was actually featured in Ebony magazine.
Okay.
So they were on the cover. So this was something that was huge because they were right at the beginning of their career. It was like, you get married. I mean, if you remember American Dream.
I mean, that's what I think. Like in my mind, saw them getting married.
Yes. Okay.
And I can appreciate it too, right? Because as a mom, I think that I wouldn't necessarily want my child to get married super young either. Not because it can't work, right? Or not because, they're not mature enough to make the decision, but because, statistics show that, like, it doesn't.
Right.
I mean, you can be the exception, and there are exceptions out there. I have some friends that dated throughout, or let me not say friends. I talk about this all the time. They were my friends in high school.
No longer.
We don't, I like her. I follow her, but we're not friends, friends in the sense of what I describe as friends. Mm-hmm. But the girl that I graduated high school with, she dated the love of her life, like, throughout high school. And then they got married shortly after high school, and they are still married today. 3 kids, going strong. I mean, so you can be the exception, but I think that it's rare, right?
Oh, for sure. And you have to say that, right? Like, especially with something dealing with this, because some people see that they're like, I'm doing it at 18. I'm pulling the trigger.
Right.
But MD, go ahead and tell us what happened back after they married.
Well, the marriage between Tito Jackson and Dee Dee made national headlines, like you said, and it stirred up widespread conversation about their future as a couple and as a part of the legendary Jackson family. And when they tied the knot, many questions whether Tito's commitment to the family would sidetrack him began, but it seemed like they were thriving. They kind of put a lot of that to the side because
it didn't hinder their career.
It didn't hinder their career. And for Dee Dee, she really didn't get caught up in the glitz and the glamour of it all. Mm-hmm. Like, Dee Dee honestly just embraced being a wife and being a mother. And she really wasn't fazed by a lot of that. She didn't feel the need that she needed to defend her choices. She felt like, I know that I'm in love with Tito and this is where I want to be. And I'm going to just focus on building a family. Now, Dee Dee quickly became an intricate part of the Jackson family, not just with Tito, but with the entire family, Jackson family at large. And she and Tito ended up welcoming 3 sons into the world. Torino Adriel Taj Jackson in 1973, Terrell Adrian Jackson in 1975, and Tito Joe TJ Jackson in 1978. And despite Tito's rising fame, Dee Dee found herself stepping back from the glitz and just focusing on being a mom and attending to the boys' little league games and, packing notes in her children's lunchboxes, as mothers sometimes do. And her boys just remember her as being nurturing, firm, but embodying the essential qualities of a good parent. She was determined to create normalcy for her boys because although Tito and his uncle were super, 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 super famous,
right?
She wanted to make sure that her boys had a childhood and they had as normal of a upbringing as possible.
Yeah.
However, the challenges of motherhood, coupled with the pressures of celebrity life, began to take a strain on Dee Dee and Tito's relationship. And ultimately, they decided to divorce, but they remained committed to co-parenting their sons. And they really had what I guess I would describe as amicable of a divorce as possible. You know what I mean? Like, I mean, divorce is contentious by its nature, but they just kind of really just was like, okay, we're going to go our separate ways.
Right.
And they focused on raising their boys. And despite this, their boys thrived. So eventually they formed their own musical group, kind of just following the tracks of their father and their uncles. And they named themselves 3T. Now, this name originated from Dee Dee. She used to call them her 3 T's. And so they just kind of took that and owned it and made that name. Steph, do you remember 3T as a musical group? Do you remember that?
I actually don't, because like when they were reaching their height, it was in the early 90s, and I'm an 80s baby, late 80s baby. So I was really like kindergarten, elementary school.
So I think you were a little older than kindergarten.
Okay, elementary school.
Yeah, definitely elementary. I was, maybe middle school. So I was early 80s baby. But I do remember them. I mean, I don't remember them being this big superstardom group, but I remember them coming out and people being like, girls being like, oh my God, they're so cute.
Okay, I'm gonna show y'all some pictures of them. This is them, like, they were putting out their debut album.
Yeah.
3T.
Look, and Michael Jackson, if you look at the third picture, Michael Jackson is in the middle of them. I mean, they were attractive boys.
Yes. They were handsome.
They were not your.
They're not my type. But
they're
handsome. They definitely were handsome. Yeah, for sure.
Well, the values that she instilled in her children remain constant. They put family first, and they avoided the pitfalls of what kind of comes with fame. And although they didn't really like become this big famous group like the Jackson Five, they were able to pursue something that they loved, but they held on to the cornerstones of their upbringing. Now, in addition to being a dedicated mom, Dee Dee actively engaged in charitable work and mentorship, and she significantly impacted not only her children's lives, but also her community. So now let's fast forward a little bit, the pivotal time in their lives of the Jacksons. As 3T worked on releasing their debut album in the late teens and early 20s, Dee Dee found herself at a comfortable crossroads. She was finally able to emerge into who she was as a woman and find her identity outside of motherhood and being a wife and now being a divorcee. Like, right, she got married super early at the age of 18. And so she transitioned into motherhood super early. Mm-hmm. And so now she's finding herself, like, her boys are older. They're in their late teens. They're adults every, by the United States definition, right? Mm-hmm. And so she's trying to figure out, who am I? And it was during this phase that she met Don Bohannon. And he was also very philanthropic, right? Mm-hmm. So she was very philanthropic herself. And it was amongst these circles that she was introduced to Don. And they had a little bit of an age gap. Now, Steph, I kind of want to talk to you a little bit about this age gap that they had, because she was 39 and he was 59.
Okay.
And despite that, they found that they had many similarities. What do you think about such an age gap as this?
Well, I mean, I'm okay with their age gap, because a lot of times when you think about age gap, you naturally, think about people who are in their teens, or that's what you usually think about. People who are in their teens and maybe they're with somebody who's 20, 25.
That's a side eye, because what's going on.
But they were at similar places in their life. And I know that my mom and I had a conversation earlier this week about my grandfather, her dad, and her mother. And she was 4 years younger than him. She was 17 when she got married, which is very young, right? Like by today's definition. And my mom was like, but as you get older, it's not that big of a deal, because if you're at, if your little cousin you're in high school, but they're in middle school, and you always make it a big deal, like, I'm so much older than you. But as you get older, that becomes different, because you might meet at the same place. Like, I know from me and my siblings, y'all are older than me, but we had children around the same time.
So we're kind of
in the same, environment and phase of life. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's the difference, right? Like, obviously, it's problematic if you are 17, you are dating a 25-year-old. That's problematic. And there's no way in which there's no world in which y'all are in the same place of life at that time. But, a 39-year-old who had children at 18, mm-hmm. right? Whose children are now grown. And she's like, it's like, my children are grown. I'm just trying to discover, like, me with an empty nest. And here he is, same thing. His children are grown. He's divorced. He's got an empty nest. Mm-hmm. And there's the age gap, but the age gap really is less significant as they are at the same place. They find themselves in the same place of life.
Right.
And so, I look at us, right? And although we're not in a relationship, but you're my sister. And growing up, we were the definition of, girl, you are in elementary school. Mm-hmm. I'm in high school. What are you talking about?
Right.
But now it's like, no, we both have kids the same age. Like, our husbands are, we do everything together. And so we're in the same phase of life. It's just different. Like, the difference in our age, yes, there's a difference, but it matters less.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. So she was excited. She was excited to really learn about who Don was and to engage with him. And Don was a former military member. He transitioned through a lot of careers, from teaching to leading roles in hospitals and the insurance company. Eventually, he was a founding state charter bank member. Like, he was a founder, which is a big deal. This endeavor required an extensive background check by the FBI. Don's credentials were rigorously checked through. I mean, it was kind of like, do you want to become an FBI agent?
Well, right. I'm about to dig into your whole life real quick.
Right. So although many might view their age difference as significant, as we just talked about, Dee Dee was really captivated by Don's personality, reflecting her characteristic charm that initially drew her to Tito as well. She was a person who, if she found you attractive via your personality, she was going to love you. It didn't matter what came along with that. And Don was a successful businessman and a community leader. He carried the weight of dual responsibilities, maintaining a high-profile career while being present for his two grown daughters. Their names were Donna and Marie. Mm-hmm. Now, Donna was a flourishing realtor, and they both embarked on a meaningful venture. They opened a Denny's diner in Watts. This was no ordinary feat either. It was the first sit-down diner that happened in that area since the Watts riots in the mid-60s.
Wow.
So this was huge. And it showed that Don really was a community helper. He really cared about his community.
He poured back into his community.
Absolutely. Yeah. And, you know, as a businessman, I think sometimes you can start these businesses, but for him, it was more about like really servicing the people, the Black people in that community that needed jobs and needed a restaurant.
Right. Because he could have put it anywhere. I mean, he didn't live in Watts.
Right.
He could have put it where he lived, but he decided to pour back into his community and invest.
Right.
That's
now, awesome. His commitment extended beyond the diner. He was an active member of the Executive Council for Boy Scouts of America, which was a prestigious honor back then, because we now know Boy Scouts of America.
It's maybe not as prestigious.
Yes. As Don navigated his professional life, his social circles were equally impressive, brushing elbows with legendary figures like Ray Charles, Stevie Wonder, and Sammy Davis Jr. To put it simply, Don was a complete package. He was tall, dark, handsome, and it didn't hurt that he was successful.
I mean, it actually helped.
Yes. Officially, Dee Dee and Don's path crossed in the spring of 1984. At the time, Dee was living in the San Fernando Valley, while Don resided a stunning $5,000 square foot home in Laredo Heights, complete with a pool and jacuzzi. Dee Dee's vivacious personality shone bright as she endeavored to connect with Don's children, despite them being grown. She quickly became a part of the family, just like she did with the Jackson family. During their courtship, Donna, the eldest daughter of Don, was busy planning her wedding, and true to her nurturing nature, Dee jumped right in to help with the preparations of Donna's wedding, and a fast friendship progressed. So, MD, I'm going to ask you, what do you think about planning weddings? Because, you know, I would say Dee was a girl's girl. You know what I mean? She just loved helping and help. She was the hostess with the mostest. What do you think about planning weddings? Is that something you even want to do?
I mean, is that something I want to do? Maybe not. But am I a girl's girl? I think I would classify myself as a girl's girl for sure. But I'm not a person, and I feel like when I think about Dee Dee, or just like when I listen to how people describe Dee Dee, she was like this, like
she was outgoing.
She was, and she just like loved people, and she just loved life. And I don't think that's not my personality necessarily. But I, you know, weddings are hard. I think when you think about weddings and you are imagining a wedding, you've never planned one, right? Like you're just like, I want to be married. I'm imagining my own wedding.
Right.
I think that the planning is like amazing and just wonderful. And I think it's more stressful than anything.
Right.
So would I want to plan a wedding? No.
Probably not.
But if you my girl, or I really, really like you, then yeah, I absolutely will help you. Now, I'm not like uber creative in that way, because you know, mom and us talk about how creativity comes in so many different forms, right? That's not my creativity, but your girl can help you find somebody. Yeah, I may not be able to help you put together the balloon arch, but I will find the balloon arch vendor.
Right, which is a good thing. And that definitely seemed to coincide with Dee Dee. She would help you do all things and hire people if she needed to.
Absolutely.
So what happened in 1994?
So in 1994, what seemed like an ordinary evening for Don and Dee Dee ended up turning into why we're doing this podcast. And Dee Dee actually went home. They actually went to dinner. And after Dee Dee and Don arrived from dinner, they ended up going to Don's home for a nightcap. And after enjoying a delightful dinner, the couple relaxed by the pool and they're sipping their drinks, a rum, a Coke for Dee Dee, and some wine. Cheers to wine for Don. Okay. Because I don't get the wine. I may not get the rum and Coke, but I'm gonna get the wine, right? And so that's what they had. Now, earlier that night, Dee had spoken to Donna, which is, remember, it's Don's daughter. And, she had expressed to Donna that she was just so, just happy and satisfied with, the relationship that she had. She was just in a good space. She was content. She was happy. She just loved the energy that her and Don had. Now, as the hours passed, the mood shifted dramatically. And around 3:30 a.m., a frantic call was placed to 911 from Don's phone. And he reported a drowning took place in his pool. When the authorities arrived, they found Don and Dee Dee both intoxicated near the pool, which at its deepest level was 15 feet.
In his panicked state, Don claimed that they enjoyed a romantic night. Now, I want to preface this by saying this was simply the 911 call, right?
Right.
We're not playing this for you guys. You can find it readily on the internet. But he just simply said that they were enjoying the romantic night in the jacuzzi. And then Dee stepped out of the jacuzzi and went to her pool, or to his pool.
Went to the pool
to check on a light. And this light was obviously below the surface. Yeah, and it was below the surface. It wasn't a light that she could just touch. And in his account, he found her unresponsive and attempted to perform CPR before calling for help. Tragically, Dee Dee was rushed to the hospital, but despite the efforts, she was pronounced dead. The news went through the family and everyone's life, and particularly the oldest, Taj, got the news. And he heard that, your mom's in critical condition. You need to come to the hospital. But he always felt like,
this is off.
My mom's going to die.
And, I can relate to that because I don't know if you guys have ever had like that feeling that something's off. You're just going through your day. Everything's fine. Nobody said anything that was bad, but you just get this uneasy feeling in the pit of your stomach, like something is wrong. Mm-hmm. And when I heard Taj describe it, that's exactly what I felt like. It was like he knew before somebody called him, before anybody told him that his mom had passed away. It was like he felt off that day. And it's just sometimes you just have that kind of connection with a person. And sometimes you just have that instinct that something is just not right. And that's kind of how he felt. And he was just so overwhelmed by that feeling when he heard it. It just took his breath away. Yeah, it took his breath away. And when they informed Tito about what happened, he was equally devastated. And he describes it as being one of the coldest days of their life. Now, as the investigation began, it was led by Sergeant Bob Snapper of the LA County Sheriff's Office. And disturbing evidence started to emerge just about the scene, right? Like the scene where they found Dee Dee and Don. And it revealed that there was severe alcohol consumption that night. Now, I'm talking about liters of alcohol, guys. Now, I'm not talking about your standard roll of alcohol. I'm talking about these big, huge liters,
like with the 1.75 container with the handle on. The handle. I had to come back to the screen to let y'all know these are the kinds that back in college and the frat would throw their parties. Those are the kinds that they would get.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Like it's not for one person
or two. It's not even for four. Like that's a lot of alcohol, to consume, obviously. And I'm going to hit y'all with some quick facts here in a minute. We're going to call them quick facts because we got a lot of quick facts in this story, right? But in the moment of confusion, Don called 911. He was so drunk. Like I want you guys to just keep in mind that 1.75 that Steph put up with Kendall, right? He was so intoxicated that he gave the wrong address,
right,
to the dispatcher.
Yeah, and then even to that point, what he said on the 911 call is somebody's drowned in my pool. Not my girlfriend,
not Dee, not the love of my life. This woman, even just somebody. But I think that speaks right to the level of intoxication, because that's what the sergeant started to see as he began to process the scene. It's like you first get there, right? And you're like rushing to the aid of the victim to make sure that, okay. But then, we know she passed. And so now they're trying to figure out, like, well, let's piece together. So I want to give you some quick facts real quick, just about alcohol consumption. Now, alcohol is absorbed into the bloodstream within 30 to 45 minutes after consumption. However, consuming alcohol on an empty stomach or drinking carbonated beverages can expedite this absorption, which results in quicker intoxicating effects. And I know, Steph, you did this research. Mm-hmm. And when I read that, I was like, I did not know that it was 30 to 45 minutes. Mm-hmm. That's pretty quick. Mm-hmm. Right? Because you probably finish your drink before 30 to 45 minutes and are working on drink number 2.
Sure.
And then if you drink anything carbonated, that also can aid in it. Or if carbonation is in the alcohol that you're drinking, champagne,
a seltzer.
Right. Mm-hmm. Now, quick fact number 2 about alcohol. Intoxication can begin after just 2 to 3 drinks. But individual factors such as body weight and gender can significantly alter this timeline. For instance, lighter weight individuals or women generally experience the effects of alcohol more quickly versus heavier individuals or men, right? So depending on your gender, depending on how much you weigh,
sure,
that could rank, that could alter how quickly the effects will take place. And then finally, quick fact number 3 about alcohol consumption: binge drinking. Now, this is, blackouts occur when we're binge drinking and are often linked to when you are consuming 5 or more drinks, and for men, but 4 or more for women, and in the range of 2 hours.
Right.
In a
so
2-hour span.
We're not talking about, binge drinking, I'm just throwing them back. No, this could just be within 2 hours. How many drinks are you having within a
2-hour span? And it makes sense when you remember quick fact number 1, that it only takes 30 to 45 minutes for you to start, experiencing the effects. So if in 2 hours you're consuming 7 or 8 drinks, I mean, you're at blackout level. You're not going to remember.
Right. Memory fades.
Right.
So we're giving you these quick facts, and we want to let you guys know that we're giving it to you so that it keeps us balanced. So you have all the information that you need to know in order to make a decision at the end of this case, whether you think Don had anything to do with it or not, or was it truly accidental? Because I think a lot of times when we talk about alcohol, because it is prevalent in our society, we act and assume that everybody knows what we're talking about.
Right.
And a lot of the times it has nothing to do with your intelligence. You just simply don't know. Right. Like, so we want to give you guys that information. Now, Detective Snapper arrived at the scene just hours after the tragic incident, and the atmosphere was heavy with tension and confusion. Don, the man at the center of it all, was visibly intoxicated as he explained the events and how they truly unfolded. Prior to that, we told you guys what happened.
Just a general
overview.
But now, Steph, tell us, what were his specific details of what happened that night?
Right. So the first thing that Detective Snapper did was he was like, well, let me give this guy a field sobriety test. And not because he was driving or anything like
that. Or
he
was going to arrest him because he was drunk.
Right? But he had to figure out, is he out of his mind or is he just drunk? Right? And he failed that. So they determined he was just drunk.
He was just drunk.
So this highlighted the lingering effects of alcohol, which is what we just talked about. And that could cloud your judgment, your memory after the final drink. After all, the couple had been in the comfort of their home, drinking without any worries of breaking any law. So that wasn't done for asserting guilt. It was simply just to rule some things out. As the police interview progressed, Don vividly described the jacuzzi area and the other side of the pool, detailing his account of the frantic moments leading up to his 911 phone call. Initially, he insisted that Dee Dee had exited the jacuzzi and swum toward the light at the bottom of the pool, yet oddly enough, he characterized her swimming style as if she were performing Olympic acts. This discrepancy raised eyebrows among investigators and hinted at potential inconsistencies in his narrative. So I want you guys to remember the Olympic laps, okay? Now, Dawn recounted how after treading water when she got into the pool for a couple of minutes, Dee Dee seemed to just stop moving entirely. Her body was sliding beneath the surface. Alarmed, he leaped into the pool, only to face an unexpected struggle as he tried to save her. In his retelling, Don emphasized the difficulty of pulling her from the water, painting a picture of chaos and desperation as he fought against her initial resistance. He managed to get her out and onto the concrete, but this was a struggle. And I want to emphasize that he said that trying to get her out, because there was so much resistance, she was fighting back, he pulled her out of the water and like basically slammed her onto the concrete, according to him.
Oh, I mean, that's intense.
I mean, he didn't say slammed, but it was a violent struggle.
Right.
Now, he said he began administering CPR, desperate to revive her amidst the scene's escalating tension. So we're back to the fast facts because we got to know all the information. Now, usually when somebody is trying to save another person from drowning, there's a couple of things that happens, and I promise I'm not going to go into much detail. But the first thing that happens is what Don encountered, which is physical resistance. Now, the physical resistance that he encountered was just that the victim of drowning is just trying to get their head above water. And what usually happens is what aquatic experts describe as a death grip, where the person is in the water and they are just trying to get themselves up for air. But in the midst of all of that, they manage to pull you down as well. And then usually if you're not an expert, which you could be an expert, and still drown because the person has administered the death grip.
Absolutely. You don't have to be, it's not good enough that you know how to swim.
Right. So the other thing is risk of injury. So as he said in his account, Dee Dee was violent. She was thrashing around and resisting him. And so there's injuries that can occur as a result of trying to save somebody. And usually those injuries are to the other person,
okay,
and not the victim, because they're the one who are trying to get you off of them, or trying to get on top of you so that they can breathe.
Almost like defensive wounds.
Right. And next is situational awareness. Like when a person is drowning, you have to have quick reflexes and be able to look at the situation you're in, say what tools can help me, quickly assess that. And in this situation, they didn't have that.
Because he was drunk.
He was drunk, and so was she. Now, I don't think MD said this, but when the 911 when the 911 dispatcher and dispatched EMT and the police, they found Dee Dee naked and Don naked.
That's right, they did.
So, it was just a lot going on. Not that they couldn't be naked, but I mean, just a lot going on that scene.
Yeah, I mean, that is a lot. Why are we naked? Yes. But we are intoxicated.
Right. So the investigation continues to unfold, and something became clear. Don, the man at the center of this tragedy, did not display a lot of emotions. And we talk about here, if you're a true crime junkie, you know that like if a person doesn't display emotion, we naturally think that they are guilty. And for me, enough true crime information, I think I'm high-key, low-key, an expert. We know
high-key, low-key,
because maybe I'm not. Maybe you can't call on me to testify.
Probably not.
But high-key on my podcast.
I listen to all the true crime podcasts. And you have a whole true crime podcast. So
I'm just saying, get into it. But I mean, I feel like I know now that does not necessarily mean guilt.
Yeah, no, it does.
But if you are not, you're not sure, or you've never heard of it, I can understand how a person can say, hey,
I think that even if you do understand it, right, you still have this default of like wanting somebody to react in a way you think you would react. Mm-hmm. Like if I found out that my, partner like just drowned in the pool, my pool at that, like, shouldn't I be
mad?
Something.
Show some type of emotion.
Some emotion.
Sad.
And so the lack of emotion caused the investigator to be concerned.
Yeah, to just scratch their head, and they still were like investigating everything. They didn't quite know what happened.
Right.
And so this just kind of was a red flag. Now, Dennis Jackson's family naturally did not believe anything that happened. Now, they didn't have the autopsy in front of them, and so they couldn't go based on that. But for them, it was very suspicious.
Why?
Because they didn't know Dee Dee to know how to swim.
Okay. And not only not know how to swim,
she was afraid of the water. She was afraid of the water. And Tito Jackson said, upon hearing about her death, what happened and why on earth was he near water?
Because, you know, he was also afraid of water.
Right.
And so he's, you know, when, the whole time he was married to Dee Dee, both of them were like, no water.
I'm not even trying to get
I ain't even, don't take me to no beach. Don't put me near no swimming pool.
Right.
Right. So he's like flabbergasted. This is just completely contrary to what he knew or what the boys knew of her.
Right. So they don't really have anything to hang their hats on, like even despite knowing that, they're just like, well, we'll just wait till the autopsy comes back and we'll figure it out then. But they had to bury their mom. And because Dee Dee was a former Jackson, she was attached to the family. Once again, she was back in headlines, but this time as a result of her tragic death. And they had the funeral, and Michael Jackson opted to not go because he wanted to put the focus on his nephews and Tito and let them grieve aside from the frenzy of the
and
media
the that he brings. Right.
But you said that he actually slipped in at the end of the funeral and gathered his nephews up and kind of shielded them away from the media attention.
Right. And just he wanted to make sure that, like, though he could not be there to support them, you know, at the funeral, which is, if you've experienced any kind of loss, you know, it's like one of the hardest moments of the whole thing, right? He ended up picking them up shortly after the funeral and flew them away just to kind of try to not just shield the media, yes, but also just try to help them not sink far into depression. I mean, which you can imagine you would after losing a parent.
Right.
Now, Dee Dee was eventually laid to rest in the family plot alongside her mother, Irma. Now, when investigators initially leaned toward ruling the death, they ruled it an accident. So they did not rule that this was a homicide. You know,
foul play wasn't
right,
involved.
Exactly. But, you know, again, like you said, Steph, skepticism brewed in the Jackson family just because of what they knew. They were haunted by these doubts, and just what they knew about Dee Dee just didn't add up to this person who always feared water. Mm-hmm. And so why would she be found in a swimming pool? Make it make it make sense.
Make it make sense.
I don't get it. So, but for the investigators, they while this was very skeptical for them, they also did their own investigation, and they learned that Dee Dee had swimsuits at Don's house. Like, she had multiple, not just one, not just two. She had multiple swimsuits at Don's house. And this appeared to be some sort of ritualistic thing that they did. Like, at the end of a long night, like as a nightcap, they'd go sit by the pool, you know. And so while friends knew and family knew of her fear, the investigators were kind of able to like write this one off as, yeah, but maybe she's evolved, right? And Steph, I just want to ask you, like, is it possible for the person that we know to evolve and to do something different? Like, I knew you to be, but now you are.
Right. I definitely think that that's a possibility. And for you to, you know, we hear that often in true crime cases. They would never. And it's like, but they could, because everybody doesn't know everything about one person. And that's just the truth.
It is. Absolutely.
You know, even your husband don't know just everything about your significant other. So I think for them not to give it space to exist, I think that, you know, is that grief talking? Yeah. Is that, you know, what is that? Yeah. I think we have to really evaluate and then say, you know, what does the evidence say? And what is that saying?
Well, and that's exactly what the investigators did, right? They began to investigate. But while they did figure, okay, well, she probably wasn't as afraid of the water as she once was when you knew her. Mm-hmm. They did find one of the statements that Don made quite perplexing. And that's the statement that you asked our listeners to focus on tonight. And that was when he said she was making Olympic style turns and swimming Olympic style laps.
I mean, and that's I feel like that's a bold comment. And it makes me feel like, bro, were you drunk when you
reflecting on your own swimming experiences, right? Like you may learn to swim, but you and Dawn admitted, yes, she was afraid of the water, but then I taught her how to swim. But did she move from learning how to swim to immediately doing Olympic style?
Michael Phelps in this?
I mean, come on.
Maybe they sense, right?
Because I have been swimming a very long time. Mom, and I hate when I say my mom because I also hate when you say my mom because
I didn't even know you.
I mean, it's our mom.
Okay, girl.
But I find myself doing the same thing, so I'd be mad at you. But mom taught us, made sure that all three of her children, she calls it her three. She made sure her three knew how to swim at an early age. So we all knew how to swim. And Steph actually, low key, high key, was a real swimmer for real.
High key. High key.
it was her sport of choice. But I swam. I've been swimming since I was a toddler. And yet I don't think that I can do Olympic style turns in the pool. Like, I could try. I think in my mind I can do it, but in reality, I don't think that I can. And so that's what made the investigators just pause because they were like, okay, so she was doing Olympic style turns. This seems really unusual. But they kind of went with it because they didn't really have anything hardcore to tie him to it.
Right.
And they began to speak to multiple people. And Donna, which is Don's daughter, she stated that her last words before she, when she stopped talking to her was, "I'll see you on Sunday."
Right. It was a good conversation.
It was a great conversation.
Dee was in good spirits. She didn't suspect anything. As a matter of fact, Donna said that while she didn't see her in the pool, she said that it was mentioned that she was learning how to swim. And so it kind of coincided with what everybody knew to be true as far as Don's family is concerned, that she was learning how to swim.
And this was the thought of "I'll see you Sunday," those last words was pretty important stuff because that was the day that Donna was scheduled to be married. That wedding that you talked about, that she was helping Donna plan. And it was supposed to be this joyful occasion. And now we have Dee Dee dead. But she felt that Dee Dee would have wanted her to continue, move forward and to have this wedding. And so guided by the belief that Dee Dee would have wanted her to move forward, she went ahead and she chose not to delay the celebration that her and Dee Dee meticulously planned. Because remember, Dee Dee came alongside of her and had her plans. And she decided to go ahead and have it. Now, she chose not to have it in the same way in which her and Dee Dee planned it, this big extravaganza. Instead, she made it a very intimate atmosphere, just asking very select people to come.
Sure.
And what is really a poignant twist in the whole story, she decided to forego her honeymoon. And, because it was just too heavy. So while she went ahead and had that wedding, she did not have that honeymoon. Don did end up walking her down the aisle. But what's really just tragic in all of this, and I don't know if I say it's tragic, but it's almost poetic in a sense that
sure it is.
That on the day of her wedding was also the day of Dee Dee's funeral. And so Don had a very hard choice to make. And he decided to walk his daughter down the aisle, and he didn't attend Dee Dee's funeral. But it's just one of those things, right? Like the wedding that she helped plan, she wasn't able to attend because she was being funeralized.
Yeah. So we have a question for you guys. What do you think about Donna's decision to go ahead and go forward and have her wedding? What would you have done? And I think y'all can drop that in the chat. If you're listening to this on via recording, then you can tell us in the comments there. Let us know what you would do, because I think that can be hard, right? Like, and a lot of people, I think, would probably say, no, I'm not going to have it. But I think, sometimes you need to go forward and think about what the person would want you to do.
Right. I think
it was hard either way, right? Like, I think it was
one of those catch-22s type of situations. You're danged if you do, you're danged if you don't. And I know when Steph and I first learned of this and we were talking about it, you know, she made a comment that like our mom would have wanted us to go forward.
Oh, that's my mom's mantra.
You move forward, go forward. Yeah. And I can't say what I would do. I think you can say what you think you do.
Sure.
Right. But you don't know. But either way, the media just swarmed the lives of those that remained, right? Jackson family and Don and his family. And it just became just a time of grief, uncertainty, doubts, what is happening. And, you know, it was clouded by so much confusion.
And suspense because they hadn't quite got the autopsy results.
Absolutely.
Back. So the autopsy results did come out and they were released. It painted a very grim picture. Dr. David Posey reported a blood alcohol concentration of 0.22, which is 3 times the legal limit. Alongside numerous bruises and cuts were found on Dee Dee's body. The injury suggested blunt force trauma with evidence pointing to signs of struggle. An alarming total of 58 separate injuries marked her neck and her face, leading to suspicion of foul play. Despite these red flags, the ruling was an accidental assisted drowning, a verdict that left Dee Dee's family distraught and seeking justice. And now they had something that they could hang their hat on, right? Despite the ME saying it was an accidental assisted drowning. Accompanied with all of those injuries, you're naturally going to think, but was it though? Upon learning these results, Dee Dee's family knew they had to act. So they began pressuring the district attorney's office to pursue charges against Don, whose narrative of struggling to rescue Dee Dee seemed increasingly implausible. He repeatedly stated that he dropped her onto the concrete. Remember I said that, like, maybe not WWE SmackDown, but I mean, you think about it. Even if you drop somebody onto the concrete,
it's a little hard, right?
Right. So the family believed he was escaping accountability, which complicated their grieving process, especially for Dee Dee's sons, who felt growing sense of injustice. Yet the DA was hesitant to proceed, citing insufficient evidence for prosecution. Undeterred, the Jackson family did the next best thing. They filed a wrongful death civil lawsuit in August of 1995, bringing attention to their claims against Don. They were represented by an attorney named Brian Oxman. They argued that Don was financially desperate and was about to file for bankruptcy at the time, suggesting he sought money from Dee Dee. I mean, she was still tied to a very rich family.
Was it her money, Steph?
I mean, I don't know. That's a good question. Yeah. Was it her money? When she declined, when he asked her that night, they presumed that he asked her that night, she declined. And then in a fit of rage, fueled by alcohol, he then attacked her and drowned her in the pool. But the accusations didn't stop there. There were public allegations of Don's violent past with past lovers and love interests. They claimed that he had a domestic violence history. Not only that, there was also a claim that there were several 911 calls placed to his residence, and they were trying to figure out who is this guy. And the lawyer for the Jacksons were able to create such a negative picture of Don. You know what I mean? So, MD, before I go into more details about these claims, were they substantiated or not, can you tell us why people would file a civil lawsuit? I think you don't have to cover that, but are there different types of civil lawsuits, or is it just kind of like one thing that you go after?
Yeah, I mean, I think you file a civil lawsuit, right? Because you are seeking to focus on establishing liability and getting damages as a result of that liability.
And is it in hopes of maybe the DA finding something that they can open up a criminal investigation?
That may be a strategy, right? Like that may be one of the strategies. So prosecution could not be filing criminal charges. And so you're wanting to still receive some sort of justice. Usually the way that I've seen it play out is you have the criminal case, and then after the criminal case, then you have civil charges.
Right.
Like with O.J. Simpson,
right.
That's how it played out, right? You had the criminal trial, they lost, or OJ won, however you want to look at it, you know, how you want to slice this cake. And then the family filed civil charges. But even if OJ was found guilty, you still may file civil charges because you're wanting to be awarded damages for the liability. So civil charges, civil lawsuits establish liability, and you then, as a result of that liability, you're awarded damages. And it's always important to understand that the level of like what it's required to show a person is guilty in a civil case is low. The bar is low. Oh, it's very low. It's more likely than not. Okay. Right? Do you know what it is in criminal?
Beyond a reasonable doubt.
Beyond a reasonable doubt. Okay. That's the highest standard that we have in the law, right? Okay. Right. And so with criminal cases, you're trying to prove beyond a reasonable doubt, and you're wanting to impose criminal penalties to the person that will result in imprisonment. Right. And so that's the difference between a civil and a criminal case, and why you may want to file a civil case is because you want to get some damages awarded to you as a result of that liability. And of course, it may be a strategy that, hey, the prosecution is not bringing charges. And so because the prosecution is not bringing charges, let's try to get the civil case. It will establish liability on the record. We will depose people. We can do discovery, which means you're gathering evidence. Right. And then that evidence now is going to be you can turn that evidence over to the DA and you say, hey, listen, you have evidence. Now we got some more evidence. So now take this and run with it.
Right. And I think because we're seeing so many things with civil lawsuits right now. Right. A lot. It's just a good full circle moment to have that conversation. So then Now, the first allegation that was tackled was the 911 phone calls that were distributed throughout by Brian Oxman concerning the 911 calls that were placed to Don's household. And Detective Sharper came out and said, hey, these were noise complaints. These were not like a domestic violence phone call. These were noise complaints. He was partying a little bit too hard. And so we came out and calmed down the party. Right. So they were able to totally negate those accusations.
And then there was one more accusation that his ex-wife, Sheila.
Which has to do with the domestic violence.
Right. And she ended up saying on the record that she made it up because they were about to get divorced and she wanted to give herself an upper hand in the divorce. And that's not beyond belief, right? Like that's some things that you may do. Like, listen, right? Because how many of us, just dropping in the comments, how many of us petty enough to do something like that?
Right. I mean, a lot. But hopefully none of y'all.
I know, not nobody.
None of y'all.
Y'all are all gonna say no. I already know.
Okay. Yes. So those rumors were also set straight, right? But the bankruptcy rumors, well, they found nothing in his financial record that suggested that he was on the way to filing for bankruptcy or that he had any bad financial dealings that caught him up in order to file bankruptcy. So all of that was
made up.
But Brian Oxman was talking to national TV. I mean, I had to say that he was talking to Hard Copy, which was like the TMZ of that time.
Which is hilarious.
I mean, it was.
In my mind, Hard Copy was like legit news growing up.
I mean, TMZ be reporting facts, girl. Don't do that. They not the shade room, baby.
Okay. No shade to the shade room.
Well, yeah. So really what Brian Oxman did was he was setting it up to muddy the waters, right? To make it look like he was indeed guilty. Like, this is our guy. And when you're on a national platform, you can do that unchecked. And nobody's trying to fact check you, because still we live in a society where people they're not entertained by facts. They're entertained by fake news and just anything that sounds good, entertainment purposes, right? And so the media was in a frenzy all over the information that was revealed by Jackson's attorney, and the civil lawsuit was eventually dismissed.
Which is so, and the reason why this is so important and critical to this case, Steph, and the reason why I highlighted what the standard is in civil cases, because I wanted you to understand and our listeners to understand how low of a bar it is in civil cases. Right. It's more likely than not. Is it more likely than not that Don Bohannon was responsible for the death of D.D. Jackson? Mm-hmm. That's the bar. More likely than not. Not beyond a reasonable doubt, but more likely than not. It means like Probably he was.
Right.
That's how low the standard is. Mm-hmm. Okay. And so for this case to then ultimately be dismissed and no charges or no liability or awarded damages were found, I think is very telling. Right. And I don't think that you can take that with a grain of salt and say, oh, okay, well, it was just dismissed.
Yeah.
No, it was dismissed in civil court.
Right. Which you should look at that in the totality of all of the information that we're presenting. Now, when the civil lawsuit was dismissed, Don just was trying to avoid public fodder. He just wanted to stay out of it. He didn't want any parts. But his daughter, Donna, was defending her father. She was quoted saying that the Jackson family owed her father an apology. And Donna then suggested that Dee Dee was not only drinking, but taking medicine, which is the reason why she was more than likely impaired. Now, back to quick facts.
Fast facts, quick facts.
Quick facts, fast facts. Now, there is an increased risk of an adverse reaction when mixing alcohol with pills or medication. Mm-hmm. And a lot of that has to deal with the fact that alcohol is a suppressant. It suppresses your system, which is a lot of the times why you feel relaxed, so you feel good and all warm and bubbly. Whereas if you're taking a upper, and I'm using that term very loosely, but something like ADHD medication where it keeps you alert and you make sure your system more aware, and you mix that with the suppressant where those can have contrasting effects on your system, okay. Right? And so that's why a lot of times when you turn over your bottle, when you get it from the pharmacist, it says,
don't mix this with alcohol.
Right, because we never know what can happen. I mean, you can bust out in hives and have an allergic reaction and die. I mean, that's extreme, but it is a factor. And also just dealing with, as you talked about alcohol, demographics also increase what happens to you when you mix alcohol with medication, depending on if you're a woman, if you're Black, if you're white, all of those things can have an adverse experience. But then you mix being in the pool with all of these things that affect your cognitive
make it make sense
ability.
Make it make sense.
I mean, y'all, it's bad. So she set it up for doubt. That's what she did. Yeah. That's really what Donna was trying to do, was to properly defend her father and say, listen, I mean, she might have been doing it. Look at this. Because you're throwing out these lies on my daddy.
So let's look at the totality of the facts. Right. And I think that's what Donna was trying to do. Not like shame Dee Dee anyway, but like understand that like she also was on medication. They were both in some ways responsible here because they were irresponsibly, because let's just be clear, drinking in excess with water involved the scenario.
Right.
Like it's crazy. Well, in the years following Dee Dee Jackson's tragic death, several prosecutors deliberated over the case, and they ultimately opted out of pressing charges against Don. And I just want to, pause here for a second, because I really think that it's important that you guys understand that when you have prosecutors, you have DAs, right? Mm-hmm. They while you could be serving and then you get elected to DA, ultimately you want to come in and establish your position as DA. Like, this is who I am.
Those big cases.
Right? I want to tackle the big cases. But here's the biggest thing. I want to get winnable cases. Mm-hmm. And it's really important to understand that most of the time, the way that DAs look at things, and I'm not a criminal attorney by any stretch of the imagination, but my knowledge of criminal law that from law school is that, you really only get one bite at the apple when it comes to cases that you take to trial criminally. Because if they come back and they give a verdict saying not guilty or they acquit, that's it. Like, you don't get another chance. It's called double jeopardy, right? You don't. Our Constitution doesn't allow you to try to keep trying them over and over again. And so because that is the standard and the bar is so high and our Constitution doesn't allow for double jeopardy, DAs, they want to ensure that I can that this is a winnable case. And I want to make sure that I really believe that this person did it. Because if I really do, in fact, believe that this person did it, I need to have the evidence that is going to support and back the fact that this person did it, right? Because I want to make sure that when I go to court, that's it all, right? We're going to, and the other side of that is even if we don't lose, but we don't win. Mm-hmm. And that's called, you got a deadlock, right? The jury's like, I can't decide.
Right.
Well, now your arguments and your presentation, the defense has seen it. The defense counsel has seen it. So it's no longer going to be, you no longer have the element of surprise, so to speak, before the defense. And so they know where you're going, your angle, your theme, how you're going to present it. And then they can take that and say, now this time, if you do decide to bring this to trial again, I know how to come at you.
I know I have my angle.
I have my angle, right? And so all that, you want to make sure that you pick the right case, the winnable case, the case where you have the facts that's going to support the guilty verdict. So you have multiple DAs that are coming in and they're seeing Dee Dee's case. They're seeing it's unsolved, it's ruled undetermined by the MD has ruled it as undetermined. And they're saying, you know, even with the pressure of the Jackson family.
And they're the Jackson family. Let's be clear.
We're adding pressure, immense pressure, right, from the media. And the media, I watched, you know, one of the, we did extensive research on this case. And one of the things that I watched talked about one of the journalists that was covering this case. He said, you know, it's one thing to call somebody who's telling you, hey, there's something going on with this case. I think you need to pay attention. It's a whole nother thing to get a call from one of the Jacksons.
I mean, yeah.
And they're saying, hey, there's something going on with this. You're not only going to perk up, but you're going to write whatever you need to write to make sure that you get that story, right? But in spite of all that pressure, these multiple DAs are like, there's not enough. There's just not enough.
Which says a lot.
It really says a lot. Now, that all changed in 1996 when a new prosecutor came on the scene, and she looked at the case with fresh eyes, and she decided, we have enough. I'm going to go to this corner and I'm going to talk to this ME, Dr. David Posey, and ask him to take one more look at this. And I want to say that he had already taken a couple looks at it. Okay. He had actually initially ruled it undetermined. And then the second time he looked at it because the Jackson family had hired their own independent autopsy. And that autopsy ruled that there were some unusual markings, bruisings on her scalp, Steph, that they felt was a result of somebody holding her down, right? And so when Dr. David Posey went back and looked at it the second time, he acknowledged those bruisings, but he still ruled it undetermined. Now, this third time, he goes back and he looks at it. And he decides, after looking at it for a third time, that he's going to change his ruling from undetermined accidental drowning to homicide via assisted drowning. And this is when everything took a change and turn for Don Bohannon. In March 1997, he found himself charged with second-degree murder and held on a staggering $1 million bond. And he wasn't, like you said, he was not poor by any stretch of the imagination. And so he had made some really good connections in the world and in the industry. And so he hired his friend, or he attempted to hire his friend, which was the renowned Johnny Cochran. And we all know Johnny Cochran. If the glove don't fit,
you must acquit.
But Johnny couldn't represent him because there was a conflict of interest, Steph. And so, we don't know what the conflict of interest was, but there was a conflict of interest. And as attorneys, we are bound by our ethical code. And so he let him know, like, there's a conflict of interest. However, I'm going to set you up with another one of my attorney friends who I am vouching for and saying, hey, he's really good. And not only that, I'm going to put you in contact with one of the most prominent forensic experts on the market at the time, which was Dr. Michael Batten. And he was a former chief medical examiner, and he was known for his contributions to forensic science. If you know anything about true crime and you follow it, you know that in the 90s, forensic science was on its rise, and we were learning things we never knew before. And he was on the forefront of a lot of this development and knowledge. And so Johnny Cochran put him in contact with him, and he said, listen, they'll take care of you. Now, Dr. Batten, Dr. Michael Batten, the medical examiner now assigned to Don's case, He meticulously reviewed the evidence, and he concluded that the case was far from homicidal. And he indicated that this was in fact a accidental drowning. And he not only believed that it was accidental, but he believed that the bruising that, the Jackson's ME found and that Dr. David Posey ended up saying was the reason for the homicide change, he believed that that was a result of liver disease that Dee Dee had. And it was not anything to do with foul play. Mm-hmm. So now it's worth noting that individuals with liver disease often exhibit increased susceptibility to bruising because a compromised liver can hinder the production of clotting factors, which leads to easier bruising and prolonged bleeding from minor injuries, Steph. And so where the ME from the Jacksons, the hired ME that the Jacksons hired, he could not make it make sense that this bruising that was found on the head, skull, was there other than to say somebody had to have held her down under the water. Mm-hmm. Well, according to Dr. Batten, he's saying, well, no, I mean, she had liver disease. And so any kind of like touching could have caused. And Steph, I want to ask you, like, do you think that could have been exacerbated by the fact that she was excessively drinking that night?
I mean, yeah, like, so we don't know if she really has cirrhosis of the liver, which that is a disease that is usually characterized by people who heavily drink. We don't know that, but the reason why a lot of people have clotting that has bruising, usually one of the diagnoses is the precursor to a diagnosis of cirrhosis of the liver is they have this bruising that occurs and can occur very like just, you barely touch the wall, right, and then because your blood doesn't clot. So I think just the fact that Dr. Posey did not evaluate the other organs and to see if maybe this was a result of liver disease, I think speaks to another layer of, are you an expert? Should you be testifying? Maybe, maybe not.
Are you doing your job?
Are you doing your job? Basically
that. Well, one of the other things that the examiner, Dr. David Posey, and the hired ME for the Jacksons had pointed out was that Dee Dee's fingers were not pruny. And so we all know this, right? When you get in the water and you stay there for an excessive period of time, right? What happens to your fingers?
Your fingers start to prune. And they believe that it's caused, say it is a, goodness, is moving away from my mind now, but basically an evolutionary process we've gone after evolving so much.
Okay.
And basically we're trying to adapt to the water. Your body's adapting to the water to make the grip better.
Okay.
So when you prune, that's what they're saying.
And so, we all know, like when we sit in the bathtub too long or we're in the pool too long, like our fingers, our toes start to prune.
Right.
And what notably that the ME that the Jacksons hired stated that does not go away when you die. So if you're in the water for an excessive amount of time, which 20 to 30 minutes it takes to start to prune, then when you die, that pruning will still be evident. Well, there was no pruning on Dee Dee Jackson's fingers, her toes, or anywhere on her body.
Right.
And the way that Don tells his story, the way that you shared our story, is that they've been in the water for quite some time. And so why is there no evidence, right, for the David Posey and for the Jacksons ME? They're trying to understand, why is there no evidence of pruning? And so, like, coupled with this bruising on her head, coupled with the pruning, it doesn't make sense. But David, Don's ME, he's like, no, this is all just evidence of liver disease, right? So you got these two experts and they're going,
back and forth.
They're going back and forth. And Don's attorney ended up presenting various pieces of evidence during the trial, including polygraph tests that Don took and passed. Okay. And Don also offered, hey, I'll take another polygraph test, but the prosecution ended up not allowing him or acquiescing to that request. And as trial commenced in June 1998, the prosecution zeroed in on Dee Dee's established fear of the water. That was their theme. She was scared of the water, and they brought witnesses forward to testify about this aversion, and they highlighted this crucial question. If she had struggled in the water, STEPH, why didn't Don have any noticeable bruises from the encounter? And that's a good question. I want you to see if you guys in the chat, if y'all want to answer. But STEPH, also for you, you made a note at the top when you were talking about his story and highlighting how you have that death grip and the quick facts, right? And you even stated that the victims are not going to have really a lot of injuries. It's going to be to the person that's saving them. And if, according to Don's story, there was this struggle, why is there no evidence of that struggle on Don?
Yeah, I just think this is another good question to ask yourself in lieu of all of the evidence that's coming in, because technically Don he should have had bruising. There were no bruising noticed on his body. I can only presume that the investigators took pictures of him after the initial interview, and then later when he probably went down for questioning for a formal interview. So I would like to think that they did that. Do we know? That's a question mark. We truly don't know. So that's something I want you guys to think about in terms of all of the evidence that we present. Now, the prosecution called the aquatics expert. I need to talk to this person because I have a lot of questions.
You have a lot of questions for this aquatic
expert? I do. But he testified and he said that the rest exactly what you just said, that a person should receive, the person who was rescuing the victim of drowning should receive bruises. They should be the person who's harmed, not the victim of drowning. Most notably, Dr. Posey served as the star witness for the state, asserting that Dee Dee was a victim of a brutal beating before her drowning. Contrary to what many believed, his testimony changed dramatically since the case began, and he now claimed that he had long suspected, like he knew,
long suspected, always knew,
which is wild to me. But it was really the revisement of the case and reviewing the evidence that he really knew that, this is what it is. And so he declared that it was a homicidal drowning. As the trial heated up, the cross-examination of Dr. Posey took center stage. It was revealed that he had not consulted with any other experts regarding the injuries or the case, but was heavily guided by Lorianne, which was the assistant district attorney, the person who reignited this case to begin with. Meanwhile, Don's defense counsel, Harlan, made a controversial decision. He chose, grab your seats, he chose not to call Dr. Michael Baden as a witness. Harlan later suggested that having Baden testify would have positioned him as a weak witness.
And just to make sure you remember, Dr. Michael Baden is the medical examiner that Johnny Cochran made sure that Don hired. He's the one that said, hey, this is a result of liver damage. And regardless of if, this is where I struggle, STEPH, as a lawyer. I struggle here because even if he's not as strong a witness as, let's say, Posey, what he's doing is he's presenting an alternative narrative what prosecution is presenting. So what narrative are you presenting to combat what the prosecution is alleging?
Right.
And he just did not. He said that he was not going to be a good witness for us.
Yeah. So, I mean, how could one of the most foremost forensic experts who had testified in many trials not be pivotal in this case?
I mean, he testified in way more trials than Dr. Posey. Am I correct?
Yes. Dr. Posey, as a matter of fact, he was the state's star witness for this case in the story period. What unfolded next was a notable misstep. Against typical courtroom tactics, Harlan put Don on the stand, a risky strategy rarely employed in criminal cases. Don later expressed that he felt unprepared, which means that he wasn't prepped before getting on the stand. And he ended up appearing like a deer in headlights because he dropped what on the stand, MD?
I mean, so on the stand, first of all, let me just, before I tell y'all what he said on the stand, let me just say that the reason why you don't want to put, even you know without a shadow of a doubt that your client is innocent, it's just you open yourself up to so much. You open yourself up to emotions that the prosecution can draw out of your witness. Right. And you just don't want to do that. You want to present a certain theme of your case, and you can do that, and you can control that when your witness is not on the stand. When your witness is not on the stand, you cannot control cross against your witness, right? And a lot of things that could never be brought in can be brought in when your witness is now on the stand, okay? But what he ended up saying on the stand, guys, is that he felt responsible, Steph, death of Lee Jackson. Now, the reason he goes on to articulate that the reason that he felt responsible is because it was his pool and he was drunk. And he felt that had he not been drunk, had he not been intoxicated, had he not been engaging in, you know, all this excessive of drinking with Dee, that had Dee even been in the pool, like had Dee still drank and had Dee jumped in the pool, he knew he could have saved her. And he believed that he was responsible because he was also intoxicated and he was not able to save her because of his intoxication level. Now, you're sitting there and you could be saying, yeah, I get that. I sympathize with that. I understand
we can't have that.
But a prosecutor is taking and they're taking it to the bank, honey, because even if they don't say nothing right in that moment, in closing argument, as an attorney, I capitalized it on
hammering down on.
I'm like, you heard him say, you jury, you heard Don say that he was responsible. He's trying to hide under the cloak of his responsibility, under the guise that it was because he was drunk. But I'm here to submit to you that it is because he knew that he held her head under that water and he pressed down and he would not let go. And he didn't let go, in fact, until she was no longer moving. And so he stood on that stand. You heard him stand on that stand. You heard it like I heard it. He's responsible. And when you go into the back and you have to make a decision as to whether or not he's guilty beyond a reasonable doubt, I submit to you he is. He's guilty and he knows he's guilty too. I mean,
that's why he should never been on the stand. And according to Harlan, he said that, you know, I didn't think he would be a great witness either. I put him on the stand.
But I put him on the stand.
Okay, sir.
Now, and according to Don himself, he didn't want to be on the stand. Am I right?
Yeah, Don said, and I think I said earlier, Don didn't want to be on the stand. As a matter of fact, he didn't want to be on the stand, and he said that he was not prepped to be on the stand. So it just goes to show you how much it was just differing opinions, and Harlan is not even, he's saying he's bad, but yet you put him on the stand. It just doesn't make any sense. It's just the narrative of both is just very complex. So you deal with the fact that he actually did take the stand, and also with the complexities, everything that was revealed during trial. Like, and during the civil case, to be honest with you, like that's not negated just because people were able to simply, that wasn't negated because during that time of the civil lawsuit, you never know what members of the jury heard about that. And this was such a high profile case. Who knows what they heard and what they thought and what they saw. And so when he gets on the stand and he says everything that he says, well, then that only continues to muddy the waters. After 3 grueling weeks of trial, the jury delivered their verdict on July 2nd, 1998. Don was convicted of second-degree murder. A palpable wave of jubilation swept through the Jackson family. The verdict was read, but Don, well, he continued to maintain his innocence and has continued a relentless fight against his conviction. Now, he was eventually sentenced to 15 years to life. He found himself trying to navigate the appeals process, citing ineffective counsel amongst other claims, but those were denied.
Now, in 2017, a special on 2020 aired, and it shined a light on this very complicated case. And interestingly, this case or this episode on 2020 has since been scrubbed from the internet. And I mean, you cannot find it anywhere. And that just, I don't know, it raises suspicion and eyebrows about why did it disappear? And I just want to throw out a question to you, our listeners. Do you think that's odd? Like, why did it disappear? Is it suspicious to you, Steph?
Definitely suspicious. I think that 2020 did an excellent job about presenting both sides of the argument. In a case like this, where you have a lot of questions, I think it is necessary to present both sides of the issue, not for us, right? Who are we? Nothing but spectators, but for justice, for the sake of justice. And so the fact that everything is actually, so I'm gonna tell you guys the actual season and episode. It's season 41 and it's episode 1. Now, 2020 has been around for decades and they have a lot of seasons and they are very tried and true to present you with 20 to 25 episodes in their season. They don't jip you. And everything is on there in season 41 except that episode. And everything else that we discovered as far as documentaries were not balanced. If anything, it swayed more to Don being guilty. And because there's just so many questions about this case, I just think that's unfair.
Absolutely. Now, finally, it's worth noting that after Don's trial, Arlen Braun, which was his attorney, went on to represent the Jackson family.
Hello, say that again because we need to say that.
His attorney, after he was found guilty, went on to represent the Jackson family in another matter that just creates more muddied water, so to speak. And it also has a lot of conflict of interest. So in 1999, Harold actually faced an investigation from the California State Bar regarding ethical concerns in the way that he acted in Don's case and his actions as the attorney of the Jackson family, because that is absolutely a conflict of interest. And as a result of the California State Bar conduct review, Harold ended up facing disciplinary actions. So the specific consequences of the review included a suspension from the practice of law, which indicated that the State Bar found sufficient grounds to believe that his conduct was not in line with the professional and ethical standards required of attorneys in the state of California. And the suspension imposed on Harold was coupled with certain conditions. He was required to complete a period of suspension, and he could not practice law during the time of his suspension. Additionally, he was mandated to meet specific requirements to demonstrate compliance with the legal and ethical standards that were determined for him to complete in order for him to resume the practice of law. The disciplinary actions taken by the California State Bar have implications for Braun's legal career. A suspension, especially one resulting from a conduct review, can significantly tarnish an attorney's professional reputation and may influence future opportunities within the legal field. It serves as a critical reminder of the importance of maintaining ethical standards throughout one's legal career.
So, yeah, I mean, with that, I think you have to consider that, one, the State Bar of California found that he wasn't acting in an ethical way in the case of Don and when he served as the lawyer for the Jacksons. And because of that, that brings more questions in spite of the facts that were in the case where he put Don on the stand and he didn't put the ME on the stand who was the expert. It makes you wonder, was he setting this up? Like, why did he do what he did? So these are questions that really I don't want to answer necessarily. I want to get you to thinking, is this case as straightforward as it appears?
Do you think, after listening to the facts, in which we hope we present it in a very non-biased way, right? Do you think that Don is guilty beyond a reasonable doubt? Do you think that the jury got it right?
Right. And so Don's family continues to this day to advocate for him. They actually hired a private investigator to investigate David Posey. And this is when we find out that David Posey was not working for the LA County Department or their medical examiner office any longer. Actually, he only worked for them for that particular case, and then he was fired. And then at the time, he had only done 29 autopsies, which makes it even more surprising. And Harold actually did a good job in his cross-examination when he said, did you consult any other experts? Because if you were an expert, you would consult other experts, right, in your fields. And he didn't. So, this really brought into question David Posey's career, what he did, what he contributed. And it really raised a lot of red flags and questions concerning the case in general. And when David Posey was asked about this case later on, David Posey said, oh, I don't remember that case. Probably the biggest case of his career. He said he did not remember it. So it's just kind of wild that this case unfolded that it did, and Don is still in prison. I was talking to MD about it earlier today, and I was like, man, it's just crazy that he hasn't came up for parole.
15 years of life. Like he could be, he was eligible for parole at 15 years.
Right.
And I read an article recently that in 2022, he went before the parole, along with another group of, along with several other people, and one being a big gang affiliated, leader. And the gang affiliated leader was paroled.
Oh, and Don was left in prison?
Was left in prison. He's 85, 88 years old.
88 years old. He survived COVID too. Got COVID in prison, survived it.
And I'm not here to say that he did it or not do it. Not did it. Not do it. Not did it. Did it. Do it. Did he do it? I'm not here to say that. What I can say is, when you think about what the purpose of prison was meant for,
sure,
it's meant for reformation and for to reformation, right? Yeah. That's the number one reason that
deter that behavior,
to deter. And I just don't know if an 88-year-old man is a danger to society anymore. Right. Even if he did kill Dee Dee Jackson, I don't know if I could advocate with a clear conscience that he should spend the rest of his life in prison.
Sure.
I think that even if he did kill Dee Dee, I think that there were we all know that he was obviously intoxicated. And I think that if he killed her, he needed to be in jail. I think he rightfully went to prison. But I think that there are a range of things that should be counted into how long a sentence is. And I don't know. I think it's crazy that you let a gangbanger who is a gang leader, who is young, out
and leave Donnie.
So
yeah, just something to consider. So with that, takeaway.
I'm gonna let you.
We've laid it in y'all's lap. Whatever you think about. So drop in the chat, leave us a comment. Let me know what you think about this case. Do you have more questions than answers? So my takeaway is really short and sweet. I know I probably said that more times than not, but I mean it this time. So for me, I think that there are some cases in true crime where I land right at the point where I say, I don't know what happened, but I know I would not have been able to convict him. And for me, that's where I land. Now, granted, I have the privilege of 2020, and I have seen everything, and I feel like I've had balanced research when it comes to this. I just think I could put him in jail. I would have been like, I don't know. And because I don't know, I can't vote guilty.
Absolutely. I think that's where I land too. But my takeaway is alcohol and water don't mix.
Yeah, you don't want to consume alcohol and swim. They don't go together. But I will say this. They just don't go together. But I will say this. Life skills are important. And a life skill for all of us, Black people, and I can say this confidently, a life skill
is to learn how to swim.
Learn how to swim. You could literally save your own life if you knew how to swim.
You would save your own life.
You would save your own life. And so this is no fade to Dee Dee or anybody.
Save your own life if you were drunk?
Well, that went to your alcohol. We don't mix the two. You understand? So that's our takeaway. We will be announcing our giveaway winners tomorrow morning. So be on the lookout for that. And y'all have to interact, give me your email address so that I can send you your digital gift card. Okay, so
Absolutely.
I'm going to give y'all a little time to get back with me. I'm not going to be unfair, but we appreciate all of you guys writing in, letting us know how much you love our show. Appreciate us. Y'all had me kikiing it up in the comments. Y'all are hilarious.
We were recently, and not to toot our own horn, but toot, okay? We were recently featured in an Atlanta journal.
Shout out to Atlanta.
And all our Atlanta listeners. We were recently featured in one of their journals.
Yes, in one of their online magazines. And we were featured earlier this year in a St. Louis online journal.
So it's really cool to see.
If y'all want to check that out, and Atlanta is probably one of our biggest markets where we have a lot of listeners. And so shout out to the aliens out there. We love y'all.
Absolutely.
So thanks for joining us.
Yes, and we're wrapping. So that is the conclusion, and it's a wrap. Season 7. Thank you for being on this journey with us this long. We couldn't be here without you, and we're just so grateful that you tune in every week to listen to us.
Yeah,
and our thoughts on true crime.
Right, and us getting off topic but coming back together.
We bring it home. Join us. We are going on hiatus. How long we'll be gone?
So we'll be gone for 2 weeks. So next Thursday will be a week, and then the week after that, another week. And of course, we'll make an announcement when we officially come back. But in the meantime, in between time, we will be doing several rebroadcasts. And if you are a paid listener, then you will still be getting new content.
So maybe being a paid listener pays off.
Right. That is a whole bar.
It was.
And and if you're like, I don't know if I want to commit.
You can do a free trial
on Apple Podcasts. You get a free trial for 3 days. I mean, you can cancel after.
I won't either because I have done it. Okay, so just join, listen, and I think you probably won't cancel all the content that we got over there for you, and you want to stick around.
Yeah.
But either way, we won't be gone long, and when we come back, we got a lot in store for season 8.
So definitely that brings me to my last point. I promise this is it. But make sure that y'all send in case suggestions. I said this. I believe in the podcast episode from last week. But sending your case suggestions. We are literally handcrafting season 8, and we want your input. Like season 8 will be listeners' choice. We will be including our choices too. But we want to cater to you guys because we just want to give back and just let you guys know how much we appreciate y'all. Merry Christmas, happy holidays, and have a safe New Year.
All right. Bye.
Bye.